So in this next tip, I'm going to combine tip 13.5 and tip 13.6. And the reason obviously that we're labeling it tip 13 and then with a sub-label of 5 or 6 is because we're talking about what an offense needs. And so this is the 5th and the 6th edition or sequence of what can happen to your offense. In 13.5, we're going to talk about what if you can't roll out pass, and the reason you can't is because the defensive ends are too good. And in 13.6, it's what if you can't drop back pass because the defensive tackles are too good. It seems pretty obvious that when you can't roll out, it is because the defensive ends don't give you an opportunity to get on the edge. And then if you can't drop back pass, typically the pressure is coming from up the middle from the defensive tackles, which causes then the quarterback to have to leave the pocket. So that's usually what happens. If the defensive ends were causing not to drop back pass, the quarterback could shuffle up in the pocket and still make a play and a reset and get the ball out of his hands. So this is what happens when you roll out pass. It's because of the defensive ends, you're not able to do that. And then when you drop back pass, it's typically because of the defensive tackles. However, we can't simply say that their ends or tackles won't allow us to do what we want to do. We do need rollout and drop back passes. We need to have both of those. Now, you may not make those the core of your offense. For example, I never really was much on running rollout passes, and I'll detail why down here. But I had those in my arsenal if or when I needed those. I was more drop back passes, as you probably discerned if you've been watching these series on what an offense needs, all right? But I recognized that I needed them both, and I had them both when I needed them. So what are the things that we need to consider if we're going to need both rollout and drop back passes? Well, number one, we want to be able to design a pass route that works for both. And the reason we want to do that is we don't want to overburden our players with a lot of plays. We would rather have a high execution. So if we can design a pass route or a pass concept that would fit a drop back pass and a rollout pass, then that would give us an opportunity to have less plays and a higher execution by our players. The second thing we want to do is, can we use an inside and outside zone blocking rules for protections? If we can do that, then we don't have to teach a whole nother set of progressions. And now for the offensive linemen, we have less protections or less rules for them to use for protections for rollout and drop back passes. And we can get that higher execution in the offensive line as well as we're getting for the receivers and even for the quarterback, because he's not learning a whole new set of pass route concepts. He can take the same concepts and understand how they fit in to drop back and roll out passes. Okay? So let's look at the inside zone and outside zone rules for protection and see if they can apply from the run to the passes. So I did a whole series on inside zone and outside zone, and you can go back and review those rules, but I'll give you an overview right now and apply them to pass protection. So an inside zone, we know that if you're covered, we like to run into the 3 technique, but if you're covered, that's your man. So in this case, the right tackle's covered, and he's blocking the 5 technique. And this is for drop back pass. The right guard is covered, so he's blocking the 3 technique. The center is covered, so he's blocking the shade. And the left tackle is covered, so he's blocking the 5 technique. One of the things that's an easy rule to understand is if you don't have a tight end, you're going to get 2-5 techniques. Now you could have 4 eyes, but even if they're 4 eyes, the tackles are still covered. So it's really simple to teach the tackles. We can tell them if you get a a pass call and it's drop back, a lot of times, as you'll see even in rollout, you're blocking the defensive ends. So there's not a lot of rules for them to have to learn. With regard to the guards, it's a simple rule too that you can categorize, is that one of the guards is generally covered and the other guy is uncovered, and he's the guy that's going to combo the two backers that are inside. So in this particular case, we've got 4 of the 5 linemen that are covered, and this is how our rules would work if we were going to run inside zone. And the left guard who's uncovered, he will combo from his linebacker to the backside linebacker. One of the rules we have in drop back pass protection is the quarterback always has the first linebacker to his arm side. So this is a right-handed quarterback, so he's responsible for the Mike linebacker. Meaning there's 6 in the box, we only have 5 protectors. We're not counting the running back because we're going to release him. And by releasing him, we can influence the Mike linebacker to not rush. Or if the Mike linebacker rushes, then typically we can get it to the running back really quick, because a lot of times this Mike linebacker is tied into the running back. Okay? So the left guard's taught, look for your linebacker to the backside Mike linebacker who the quarterback is. So if we were going to run inside zone, then this left guard, he would be responsible for taking over the shade and then the shade to the Mike. So it's not that much different with regard to what we want to do. It's just that the left guard now in pass protection on a drop back is the guy that's going to combo the 2 linebackers, okay? So we can use inside zone rules for a drop back. We would use outside zones for rollout. And what we would do there in outside zone is it's the same rules. If you're covered, look to the guy in next to you, and if he's uncovered, then you 2 will combo to the next level. But if you're covered, that's your man. The only difference is you're now going to reach for his outside armpit breastplate. So we'll go over these again, and this is the field side, because obviously we want to roll out to the field side, particularly in high school. The boundary is so short, it's just not a good idea to roll out into the boundary. So the right tackle's covered, so he's going to reach the 5 techniques outside armpit breastplate. The 3 techniques covered, and the center next to him is covered, so he's going to reach the outside armpit breastplate with the 3 technique. Now the center, the man next to him, the left guard, is uncovered, so he knows he basically has combo. So the left guard's going to combo and come over and take the shade, and the center would take the Mike linebacker if the Mike linebacker chose to attack that A-gap for whatever reason, whether it's a read he has or whether he's just told automatically when the ball snapped he's coming. Okay? So those 2 are responsible for the Mike and the shade. Okay, the backside left tackle is covered, but we know we have a will linebacker, so he's going to do his rule of what he would do, and that's the 18-inch cutoff, where he's going to step here and make sure the will's not going to run through. If the will doesn't run through, then he's going to turn and block the 5 technique. So that's our outside zone rules applied to a rollout pass to be able to get that. The variable that we have is this running back. We could take this running back and we could run an outside zone fake away from really where the outside zone blocking is, and that tends to hold the linebackers because they're reading this mesh exchange for what they're supposed to do, because not only do they have to read the mesh exchange, because they don't know if the quarterback's going to pull this or give it off, and they've got to read that. Okay, so it slows them down. If that's really good fake and it slows not just the linebackers, but it also slows down the defensive linemen, because a lot of times they'll peek, even though they may not react to these blocks, because technically they should be moving down the line of scrimmage with these blocks, but a lot of times either they get tired or they peek and they cheat. And so this motion, which we would discern through scouting, this play action motion that we would fake across, might hold everybody, and then that's what we would do. However, if that's not effective in slowing down the front, then we can take the running back, as you see in this dotted line, and we can go help seal the edge with the 5 technique, particularly if he's pretty good. Okay? So we have a couple options with the running back. All right? The next thing we wanted to talk about was, can we design a pass route that works for both? So this is what I call the 2 route. I numbered all my pass concepts or pass route combinations by numbers, and I used a number system, okay? So in the 2 route, the X ran a slant, the A would run a fade or a seam, the Z runs an out and up, and the W would run a dig. And in this particular case, out of a 2x2, we would be play action with the B back. We could release the B back, but out of 2x2, we kind of like to use the play action to give these 3 routes a little bit longer time to develop, okay? So can we take this drop back and put it into a rollout? Once again, we're going to put the ball in the hash because we would roll out to the field, okay? So here now is the X slant really becomes a shallow, and he understands that because he knows we're going to roll to the field. He'd cut his split down just a little. We don't usually like to give anything away like he's going to run across the other side by his split. So he'd be at the top of the numbers, and when the ball snapped, he's just going to turn and run under the linebackers and turn his slant into a shallow cross so that he can get to the other side, all right? The A has a seam or a fade, so that works good. He'll actually go off the rear end of the X, so he's going to make sure he doesn't go in front of the shallow. So that works good because we have really a backside throwback if we wanted that. The B in his route, if he ran his route out of 2x2, he has a post. So he's going to run a post. All right? The Z's running his out and up, and the W is running his dig. So as we roll out, these 2 lines indicate, well, if this 5 technique is really good, and he starts running down the line of scrimmage and he pulls the quarterback up, then the quarterback can pull up and reset here, and he's got a post or a shallow to dump the ball to, okay? He might even hit the dig, but if he had to pull up when he's rolling out because the 5 technique is really good and we're having trouble getting outside of him, we have something for him to throw if he has to pull up, okay? Then if he keeps running, all right, and he turns this into that, as he runs, he has the shallow coming with him, he has the dig that's coming across his face, and he can throw downhill on the run, so he could jump it to the shallow, he could dump it to the dig, or if this out and up is open, he can throw that home run throw to the out and up. So we've taken one pass route design, and we've turned it into a drop back and a rollout. And we haven't had to teach any new routes to the receivers. We haven't had to teach the quarterback to understand any more routes. Concepts, he understands them from drop back or he understands them from rollout. He just has to know that if he gets pulled up, it ends up being a drop back. We've just moved the pocket. But we didn't do that intentionally. The 5 technique did that for us. Okay? So we've just used inside-outside zone for protections and haven't had to teach anything new. And we just designed a pass route that worked for drop back and play action. So what's the disadvantages of rolling out? Because there are some things that you need to consider if you're gonna do a lot of rolling out. And that is the quarterback grabs the ball and off he goes. And here's what the disadvantages are. First of all, number 1, it restricts the field. You're only throwing to a certain side of the field, and anytime you do that and the defensive backs see you restricting the field by throwing there, it's just easier for them. They have less space to cover, okay? So they see you coming at them and they can go match up. They can match up with the routes a little easier because what they understand is when you roll out, you're restricting your routes, okay? So you'll see that when we roll out to this side, once the quarterback passes the post, he's done with the post. He can't throw the post because he's not going to pull up here and throw it all the way back. That's going to get picked. So if he starts rolling out, the free safety is going to start moving with him. Okay, the corner sees the shallow and sees the A. He'd take the fade, but he starts rolling. He'd end up over here on the post. Okay, depending on how they play this, the strong safety could come on the dig and the corner could take the out and up, and that's usually what would happen. So they see the rollout and they can jump the routes a little quicker. It will allow them to do that. All right, and then you understand that because we're restricting the routes, we're going to only run sideline or hash routes. In other words, once he gets it past the post, all the routes have to happen between the hash and the sideline, okay? And that's why we're running this shallow to get this X all the way over to the other side of the field where the hash is, or beyond the middle of the field, to be a viable threat. All right, so those are two disadvantages in terms of making it easier for the DBs, and then our routes get restricted to that side, which helps the defensive backs also. All right, the thing that I really want you to understand is that it's not as easy for the quarterback to throw on the run as it is to drop back pass. Because what happens is when he's throwing on the run, there's more techniques to do. So let me go through what those are. The first thing is his climb yardage has to be right. In other words, if this defensive end doesn't go down the line of scrimmage and he can run up the field and he can beat our defensive tackle by ripping and running, then this quarterback has to make sure he has about 9 yards depth, because otherwise he'll run right in to the defensive end. So he's got to get 9 yards depth, and when that happens, that flattens out the defensive end. So as he sees that and he starts to run upfield, he starts to flatten out because he sees the depth of the quarterback. So that's really important that he gets that 9 yards depth, because that influences the attack angle of the defensive end. If the end chooses to run straight up the field, what I found in teaching this, and I've taught this to hundreds of quarterbacks on my team or in my private training, then what happens is he has an angled out running. Because the defensive end's running upfield and the quarterback's running a circle, and he has a chance to outrun that defensive end because that defensive end has to redirect. So that's the first thing. He has to get his climb yardage right. And I'm telling you from experience, they all cheat on it. They want to get out there fast, and the next thing you know, instead of 9, they're at 6 yards, and the defensive end grabs them. And so you really got to coach that hard. The second thing is, as we talked about, that right angle that they run at, once they get by the defensive end, they've got to run downhill to the middle of the field. And the reason they have to do that is I tell them, this is like you're playing option football, only instead of pitching it, you're going to throw it forward to one of these guys. But they have to attack the middle of the field. Now, if you look at this is too deep on 3 receivers, which is generally not what you want to do, because there is no alley player right there. That's the strong safety in the corner, and with 3 receivers, they've got to cover somebody. So what happens is if the quarterback if he does run to the middle of the field and everybody's covered, he can just run it. So we tell him, you can't shortchange this and start running either downhill too early or take it too flat, because you're not a threat then. We want you to run downhill at the middle, at the hash, or in the middle where the Z's lined up, and attack the secondary for run support. And if they come to you, somebody's wide open. If they don't come to you, you can just run downhill and run the ball, okay? So they have to get that angle right down the hill. The second thing is, talking about mechanics, they have to rotate their shoulders. So when I'm running down, I'm on the run, a lot of times you younger quarterbacks, they don't rotate their shoulders. They'll just throw with all arm instead of turning their front shoulder and being able to accelerate their arm, okay? So you've got to watch for the mechanics of them turning their shoulders, because they have a tendency when they're running not to do that. They just keep their left side stable and throw with their arm, and that causes inaccuracy. And if you see the ball flying high, that's typically what has happened. The fourth thing they have to do is they have to understand, anytime a quarterback is running, their hips, which supply the speed to your arm, their hips are going to have more arm speed. So this is more of a touch or a slower velocity arm throw, because all the speed is coming from their hips from running. So when you first start seeing quarterbacks do this, they tend to really sail a ball over a guy's head, throw it behind him, and they're inaccurate. So the first thing you might say is, well, we can't do rollout passes because he's not accurate rolling out. Well, the thing I always had to tell them is, look, you're running full speed, you have more speed in your hips, so you've got to slow your arm down a little bit and just be smooth with your release. So you've got to adjust the arm velocity when you're throwing on the run, to accommodate for the speed, extra speed you're going to have to your arm from your hips and running. Okay? So that's the disadvantages of rollout, or I don't want to say disadvantages. These are the things you have to coach when you're going to do rollout passes. Okay? As I mentioned, you're going to need both. You need both because sometimes the D tackles are going to be too good and you need to roll out, and sometimes the defensive ends are too good and you need to drop back. All right? So what I'll present to you next is I'll present to you some of my pass concepts and routes that are similar to the two route that work for drop back and rollout that I use to have less plays and high execution for the receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks. And I'm not saying that you need to use my routes. I'm just going to give you some food for thought. You should just go into your pass route concepts and see which one work really well with drop back and rollout. Not all of mine did. I have 9 basic concepts, but I know I have 3 or 4 core ones that work really well, like this 2 route with drop back and rollout. I'll also talk to you about how I called that. I have a numbering system that I use to tell the players whether it's drop back or rollout and which side we're going to, and then what the route concept I want taught is, that I've written a whole book on that you can find on my website, or if you just Google me and look at the books on Amazon that I've written, you can see that. So I'll give you an overview of that also to give you food for thought. So here are 3 other pass route combinations that I use in my offense that serve as rollout and drop back passes. And so I've done the drop back passes in the 2x2 formation, and I put the ball on the left hash in these 2 routes only because I want to be able to then draw the rollout part of that so you can see how that works. So this is what I call my 0 route, and in 0 the X has the takeoff, or what that tells him is to release inside any corner defender and then climb into a seam/fade. The A is running a speed out, the B is running a swing or a bubble route, the Z is running a slant, and the W is running a post. So in terms of drop back, you can see that basically we would be isolating off this Sam defender, and if he sat in the slant, we'd throw the swing. Okay? If we wanted to roll out in that, that still would serve a really good purpose, is that we could have him roll out and head downhill, and then that would put this Sam in a particularly tough bind. Okay? Because if that Sam started to come up and get him, we could have the Z idle down, or despite the drawing here, which shows limited space, this Z is all the way on the right hash. He would have enough time to be able to dump it to that Z, okay? If the corner happened to come up, happened to sink back, and we were rolling out, he could always take it and dump it to the B back on the swing route, who's now outside the perimeter of any of the defenders that might be chasing him. Okay, so we can turn this drop back into a rollout, or we can also, when the ball's on the left hash, take this 0 route, put it in a 3x1, and do the exact same thing. And what happens is he rolls out, and he's got the ability to throw this slant. He's got this ability, if the strong safety gets beat, to throw it over top of his head to the post, or he can throw it out here to the swing route if the corner sinks too deep with that post, okay? If they all match up and for some reason they rotated like this, then he'd just take the ball and run it, okay? And that's what we want to accomplish when we talked about earlier about having this quarterback get 9 yards depth and run downhill and stress that alley defender. All right? The thing about this zero route that I like and that I believe in, I've done an earlier talk about not having wide receivers block because they're receivers and they just don't like to do it. This is one of the ways that I can get the bubble screen and throw that without having receivers block. So even if you look back up here, and we did this as a drop back pass, okay, we put the Sam linebacker in a bind with regard to if he's reading this back and this back flares out like this, he's got to decide, and we can determine if he's been coached to come downhill now, and if he has, then this slant is wide open and we throw that, okay? And so we haven't blocked this, we haven't taken our inside and blocked the Sam, and we haven't taken our W receiver and blocked the corner because I don't want to spend all the time working on the blocking and they don't want to block anyway, okay? So this particular route gives us the bubble without the wide receivers blocking, and we found that to be very effective, and it kind of gives you food for thought about that in terms of running to a space where a defender has to stay, and if he doesn't, we've replaced him with a receiver in a route. We can throw it, okay? The second route is the 4 route, and in the 4 route, on the backside, the X would be running a post, the A is running a slant or a shallow cross across the field, okay? The B is running an arrow out, and what we mean by that, he picks a point 6 yards on the sideline and he runs directly to that. He's not going to run up the field into where the Sam linebacker is and then run a speed out, okay? The Z is running what I call an in route, and I call it an in route instead of a curl because I don't want the receiver at the top of the stem to make a circle or a hook at the top, and I want him to put his foot in the ground and turn. Okay, the equivalent would be if he was running a 5-step hitch. This is a 7-step hitch basically, or 7-step, what I tell him is an in route. So he called it an in route, so he always turns in and he turns straight back down the stem. The reason I coach it that way is because I always want the quarterback to know that if he got blitzed and he had to throw it to this particular Z on the in route, that if he hasn't turned yet, just throw it at his back, and by the time the ball's in the air, he will have turned around and be able to see it. So I always make sure the routes are compatible with if the quarterback got blitzed and he had to throw it earlier than he really wanted to, okay? The W here is running his takeoff, which once again tells him to release inside the corner and then get into the seam and turn it into a seam fade, all right? So on the drop back part of that, it works really well. We know exactly who we're throwing off of. In this case, you can see that the Sam linebacker runs, we throw the in, etc. All right? So what happens if we turn this 2x2 into a rollout pass and he rolls out? You can see we still have really good routes. He can throw the B on if he sees the corner sink too far with the takeoff, he can throw the B on the arrow out. If the Sam linebacker runs with the B on the arrow out, he's simply going to throw the Z on the in. That's typically the first read for him, is to find the Sam linebacker. Because he's running downhill where the Z is on the hash or into the alley, if he gets the Sam linebacker come to take him, then he's just going to dump it to the Z on the end as well. Okay? I mentioned earlier in the T route, if he ends up getting pulled up here, he's got this shallow coming across his face that he can turn and throw it. Or in some instances, if you get a safety that's kind of peeking and he starts to rotate over with the rollout of the quarterback and he goes down in the shallow, there's some cases where he's running and he just makes a reset and he throws the backside post. So he can turn that rollout into a reset and throw the backside post. So that's the 4 route, drop back out of 2x2. Out of 3x1, if we want to roll out right away, then he reads the exact same things that we just talked about in 2x2. He rolls out, he watches the Sam linebacker. If the Sam linebacker goes to the end, then he's going to work off this corner. If the corner sinks, he'll throw the B on the arrow out. If the corner sits, and he takes the B, he can work off the safety. And if the safety sits on the in route, he can throw this seam router, which ends up being a fade. So he has all the good options that he had over here. If he gets pulled up, he can dump it to the shallow coming across, or he can throw the backside post if he has to get pulled up. He even could throw the in route if he got pulled up. But that's the 4 route, all right? The third one that we do, and I drew this on the right hash so when I can explain the numbering system to you, all right? And I'm going to go over the numbering system after I get done with this 5 route. So on the 5 route, on a drop back pass, the B has a hitch, the Z has a fade, and the W has a corner route. And so typically you see, well, they can match up easy on that because the Sam easily can play the hitch and the strong safety's playing the fade where he's aligned in and the corner's aligned in the out. So it's not really a good pass to throw when they're playing too deep with regard to that. But what we would have is we would use this route to hold particular people in their zones and then be able to throw one-on-one against a person. So for example, if we see that the strong safety sits and he doesn't backpedal when we drop back, then we would throw this fade. If we see that the corner is getting too much depth because of any of these other routes that we've run, then we would throw the out. So we're throwing this, even though it looks like we're throwing right into their coverage responsibility, we're throwing this route because we see that they're not playing their techniques right, okay? If we turn this drop back into a rollout in 2x2, then what we have is we have the same linebacker in a bind in terms of if he goes run support, then we're just going to dump the ball to the B, all right? If rolling out has any effect on the strong safety's eyes or the corner's eyes, meaning the corner sees a rollout, so he jumps that out route, or he sees the rollout and he starts to hesitate or work his way over to the fade, or the strong safety sees the rollout and it settles him down, then he's just going to throw it over top, okay? Or he'll just dump it over to the W. It's not a hard read to him because he's in space and he can see that really easy. If they match up with their routes really good, then what we have is we pretty much have divided their defenders and they're playing and he can just turn it and run it. So we've had that happen also, and it ends up being a pretty big gainer because we put them in a bind. It's 3-on-3, and the 4th guy is the quarterback running the ball. If we threw this from the right hash and we just make this a rollout into 3x1, we get exactly the same possibilities with regard to when we roll out reading the Sam or reading the strong safety or reading the corner in terms of their techniques, and if not, he can pull it and run it. The nice thing about this route also is we always have a backside post. So I always like to have something on the backside. If he got pulled up, he can get that A on the post. And one of the things I really coached hard is I coached the backside route and just to tell him, look, you've got to get across there, run full speed, because you never know if you get pulled up, you're the home run throw. Because obviously there's a big hole on the backside that this free safety would have to run a long way. Or if they play Tampa 2 and the Mike linebacker have to cover that, he's not going to get that, okay? When it's in 3x1, we would tell the A to release between the guard and the tackle and then get across almost like a climb route where he just wants to get to the middle of the field as fast as he can to be there for the quarterback when he rolls out. So that's the 3 routes along with the 2 route which I showed you earlier that would have we would have in our drop back and roll out and not have to teach anything new, and we can get a higher level of execution. So the next part I want to talk to you about is how do I call this? Just to give you food for thought, not that you have to call it the way I call it, but I use a 3-number system to call plays at the line of scrimmage. For example, this play, the 0 route, if we ran drop back or roll out, or excuse me, if we ran roll out, it would be 8-6-0, all right? The first number 8, it tells us the type of play that we're running. So when they hear 8, they know that that's a rollout pass, okay? The second numbers, it could be 6 or 7, and that tells them the direction. So that when they hear 6, we know we're rolling to the right. When they hear 7, they know we're rolling to the left. So the linemen understand what blocking rules they're going to use, because remember we talked about we're using our outside zone blocking. So when the lineman hears 8, they know, hey, we're going to roll out, so we're using outside zone blocking. When they hear 6, they know that we're using outside zone blocking to the right. When they hear 7, they know we're using outside zone blocking to the left, because that's where we're rolling. The last number, the third number, is the play. So in this case, it would be 0, it could be 2, it could be 4, or it could be 5. That's the play or the route combo. Okay? So we want on 860, we're going to roll out, we're going to roll to the right, and we're going to run the 0 pass route combinations. My receivers always run the route that the pass combination tells them, no matter where they are. So it doesn't matter if the X is on the right or the X is on the left. When he hears 0, he's going to run that route. Okay? So they have to know the formation, and they have to know what their responsibility is on any of the routes that we have, and then they just line up wherever I tell them, and they run that route. So they don't have to remember if I'm on the left and I have this route, this play that I run this route. But if I'm on the right, I run a different route. I don't want them thinking like that. I want them to know that in the 0 route, you run that route. In the 4 route, you run a particular route, and the 5 route. And that stays the same the whole time. And that helps us get a higher level of execution. Okay? So that's our numbering system. The type of play is always the first number. The second number is the direction that we're going to roll out. And then the third number is what the play pass route combination is going to be. Okay? The other question that I want to answer is, why is the defense coverage always in cover 2? And the reason being that I draw it in cover 2 is, in our particular offense, people really respect our short passing game, but we always have deep routes. So you notice there's always a 3-level route, and I've explained this in another video also, is that we have a home run throw, a mid-range throw, and an underneath throw on every single possession. So people respect us, our pass game, so we get cover 2. Almost all the time we'll get some form of cover 2, may get cover 4, but rarely do we get cover 3. And so what you'll see is we can control the box that way. So anytime we're in 2x2, we know we're going to get cover 2, and there's only going to be 5 in the box. When we go 3x1, we're making them move the will linebacker back in the box, and so there's 6 in the box. So that's the reason I always throw a diagram cover 2 when I'm doing these plays.